Good. All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm excited to, it's been a minute since I've been able to give a talk. We've done a couple of webinars a year or so ago, but I'm excited to be back in front of people. It feels like forever since 2020, we've really not been doing too many of these. When we were thinking about giving some talks here in the office, I tried to think to myself, what's something that I get asked all the time or that people, practice members bring up to me all the time? And this is probably asked to me more outside of the office than inside of the office, but like, people tell me, I got a shoulder, I got a back thing. This talk is specifically titled The Back Pain Problem, but the reality is musculoskeletal aches or pains in our shoulders, our arms, our elbows, our knees, our hips. It all is coming from sources that we can do some stuff about, in addition to obviously getting your chiropractic adjustments and taking the advice that me or Dr. Lee are giving you when you come in. We're going to talk about some practical things that you can be doing, ideally even on a daily basis, to help out if you have some of these things going on. So one of the first components I want to touch on is we're going to be touching on the different ways that we can handle the different types of musculoskeletal pains that can be developed. Now, I have Facebook videos on how all of these different things actually manifest in your body. So we are not going to be going over and rehashing how this stuff actually comes on. Those could be deeper topics, and it could take me a lot longer to explain all those. So if you are interested, it's like, ooh, I think I might have that one, like a physical trauma or some acute or chronic stress. Go back to our office Facebook page. It's ADIOFL on Facebook, and look us up, and you can watch all those videos. They're also broken up into individual things, so it's not, you don't have to watch a 30-minute video just to look at that one thing. But we are going to be talking about what we can do no matter which of these attributes are causing that musculoskeletal ache or pain that you can start to do practically, even, starting today potentially. So the first one we're going to talk about are physical traumas. Now, the big thing about physical traumas is this is the one that everybody knows when they've gotten it. If you've had a slip or fall, if you were in an accident, if you tried to lift something, you didn't realize how heavy it is, and you physically hurt yourself, we know we do that, right? But what a lot of people don't realize is how best to help take care of that once it's happened. And this is one of the things that I always like to let people know. You can't expedite or speed up the physical healing process. And what do I mean by that? If you cut your skin or you pull a muscle, it's going to take a minimum of 7 days, if not a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, for that tissue to just heal itself. If it's a supportive tissue, like a tendon or a ligament, it takes a minimum of 2 weeks, up to 2 months. If you fracture something because of that trauma, you can't speed up the process of those bones healing. It will take 6 to minimum 8 weeks for those bones to set and heal. You can't speed it up any faster than that. And so the pain that's associated with it isn't going to go away any faster than those tissues can heal. However, you can absolutely slow down that healing process. If you're not doing the right things, once you've damaged tissues, you can take what would normally be a 2-week process for your body to heal and turn it into a month or 2 months if you keep re-injuring it. So listening to your body when you've had a physical trauma is super important. We are living in a culture that absolutely tries to rush that process instead of slowing down and working with it. So knowing what tissues you've injured is important. Let's say you just kind of pulled a muscle or something, you were lifting something that was a little too heavy. Again, 10 days to 14 days later, you can start back to activity. But if you strain something, you have to give it at least 2 weeks before you can start lifting stuff again. If you don't, you're going to keep re-injuring that same issue. I'll give you a perfect example. I had a gentleman come in about 2 weeks ago. He wasn't sure what had happened. I evaluated him. I took a couple of x-rays. I found out he had fractured 3 ribs. I could have, it wouldn't have mattered how many times I would have adjusted him. It wouldn't have changed the fact that he had to wait and stop and let those ribs heal before he could move on to the next phase. So knowing what tissue you've damaged is important because that will give you a time frame. Can you get back to activity in a week or two, or do you need to take a month or two to slow, to give yourself to recoup? Now, on the flip side of that, what do we need to do once we've let our body start that healing process? This is huge. Post-recovery recommendations are a big thing. Once you've had that initial tissue healing portion happen, the next thing is getting your body in motion again. When you've whether it's a fracture, a sprain, strain, or just a muscle pull, you stop using that area. Let's say it's your elbow, your arm. You're gonna restrict it. In fact, the doctor, if you went to an orthopedist, would tell you to put it in a sling to not move it around. But after that period of time has passed, you don't have as much motion in that joint. If it's your back, same thing. If you've been laying on a couch or laying in a bed for a week because you hurt your back, your body isn't moving as adequately or as normally as it should. So getting back into motion, once you've given your body enough time to heal the soft tissue components, is a big, big deal. Start simple. Literally, walking is my #1 go-to for people when they're just trying to get moving in. Don't try to jump back into pickleball. Don't try to jump back into gardening the day you get the all clear to start moving again. Start with something that's tolerable and work your way back slowly into it. So starting to move is an important thing, and also remembering that if it's been a larger injury, like a sprain, strain, or a fracture, you can't jump back into as long a duration as you could have before you hurt yourself. So if you were walking for 30 minutes before you hurt yourself, and now you're trying to walk again, don't make that first walk 30 minutes. Make it 5 minutes, make it 10 minutes, something very tolerable. Know that you can handle that and work up from there. The next component is, and this is actually a big one, because even people who have had an injury in the past and you gave your body time to heal and you started moving, you got back to normal. You weren't feeling pain or discomfort anymore, and you felt like you were doing good past that. A lot of people don't realize what it takes to get back to full function. It usually takes months, if not a year or so, to get all of your functionality back after especially a pretty traumatic event or injury. And so once you've gotten some mobility back and you feel like you've gotten adequate mobility back, strengthening around that area that you've now remobilized is also very important. Sometimes it could have been a culprit of the injury itself or the pain itself. If you slipped or fell and you broke something there, you want to strengthen up the hip, the low back, even more than it was before you fell the first time. But that happens, that's the last thing that happens, because if you let the tissue heal for 2 to 3 months, then you take another 2 or 3 months of getting in motion, and then you're feeling good. You're not having any pain anymore, and you start, and you're like, I'm 100%. You may have some underlying weaknesses there that 3 or 4 years down the line can come back and haunt you because you didn't give your body all the strength and stability it could have had. So once you've given yourself time to heal from the acute injury, once you've started moving again and you feel like you've gotten adequate or as much motion as you can, doing some simple strengthening exercises around the damaged or injured area is the next big step you should take. Now, this next one is one that is super important to me for letting other people know. These are repetitive or cumulative stresses. These are actually the problems that we see more than anything else. Yeah, people know when they've hurt themselves, if they've overdone it, they've slipped, they've fallen. But people don't often realize how much they will cause health issues and aches or pains from either doing something repetitively that isn't really that healthy for your body, or not moving enough. Sedentary lifestyles or sedentary positions are the #1 cause of musculoskeletal aches and pains in America today. And most people, when they come in and tell me, oh, I hurt myself, they said it just started 2 weeks ago, or I woke up with it, or I didn't do anything to hurt myself, and yet here they are in a lot of pain. This is usually the culprit. It's not weeks or months, it's years and years of these repetitive activities or not moving adequately that have gotten people into these situations. Chiropractically speaking, this is what we deal with more than probably any other condition. But how we deal with this is a lot different than in acute trauma. Usually our first thing is getting you reactivated, getting you moving. Now, just moving in general is an awesome thing. Getting people walking again, getting people to go into a pool again, getting people to start bicycling again if that's what they enjoy. But if it's specifically to an area of your body that is causing the problem, let's say it's your neck or your shoulder, or it's your low back or your hip, it's activating that specific area is what you have to focus on. Because you may be a walker. You might be somebody who goes out 3 to 5 times a week and get 10 to 30 minute walks in, but your neck and shoulder are still killing you. And that could be because you're on a computer or you're working on your tablet for an hour or 2 a day, 7 days a week, and you don't realize it's this area of your body that needs that increased mobility or motion added to it. So starting to move those areas that are restricted is the first thing we do for either excessive sedentariness or repetitive activities that have created a strain or a damaged tissue in that part of the body. So the next thing on top of that is making sure we're breaking down what we call patterns. So this is not as much for the sedentary person. The sedentary person, first and foremost, you just gotta start moving. That's we're gonna jump into that. But let's say you have a job, or you love gardening, or you have a recreational activity that you enjoy doing, or if it's in the case of a job, you have to do repetitively, but it's the same motion over and over and over again. Not just moving that joint more, in some cases, moving that joint more isn't necessarily the case. It's working on not moving that joint in a poor manner or in a way that causes problems. I'll give you an example that I deal with a lot here in the office, and those are my golfers. Golfing is one of the few we call unitasking sports, meaning, depending on how good of a golfer you are, you're doing the exact same motion between 60 or 120 times every time you go and play golf. But you do the same thing over and over again. That will add up. And if you don't do something, it's not just needing to get more motion, because they're moving a lot as they're golfing, but they need to get motion in that's going to unwind or not cause that repetitive activity to create that strain. If you're a gardener and you're used to just bending over and pulling a few weeds or putting something in the ground, ergonomically, you've got to know how to do it right. If you're not, using your body correctly, or if for something happened, maybe you had a knee replacement, you can't use your body correctly anymore, learning how to do it so that you're not putting increased stress or strain or repetitive stress or strain in that part of the body is the next most important thing. So if you have called compensation, like let's for example say you have a knee replacement and you love your gardening, you're gonna have to learn to garden with a stool. You can't just go and not use the leg and expect the rest of the body to always compensate and not cause you to have a problem. So oftentimes when we're dealing with repetitive activities, we're trying to find the thing that has created the biggest stress or strain and undo that, or give you a new activity that will offset a repetitive one. And then similar to when you're trying to recover from an acute injury, once you've gotten more mobility back in your body, you can move a little bit more freely. You're starting that process of healing and maybe you're not in as much pain. It's so important to make sure that you're strengthening your body up around, especially a weakened area. This is probably the one thing that gets missed the most. When we're in pain, we're willing to do anything that the doctor tells you to get out of that pain. But once you're 2 or 3 weeks out of that pain, you forget that it was ever painful and you don't keep up with the things that will actually help you in the long run. So initially, sometimes it's baby steps to get you moving a little bit more, to get you moving in a way that's not going to cause that problem to keep coming back. But if you don't actually strengthen the body more globally as a result, it's going to be temporary in the long run. You're only going to get the results for a few months or maybe even a year. But we want you guys to have the results for the rest of your lives. We want you, for correcting one of these problems, for it to be as permanent of a correction as possible. One of the biggest restrictions to that, though, is degenerative changes. Sometimes there are permanent changes that have occurred or happened, and we're never going to get you back to 100% mobility or 100% strength. But know that your body always has the capacity to heal. It always has the capacity to get stronger as time goes on. And so, whenever you're working with your practitioner, whenever you're working with somebody who's trying to help you in these things, knowing what limitations you may have, but knowing that there's always the ability to get stronger in those areas. So once you're moving, once you're feeling better, that's not the end of the road. That's the time you can really take advantage of the fact that you can start to help your body out more in the long run, more for years to come. And it's making sure that once you've gotten moving, once you've undone whatever that repetitive strain was, that we actually start to strengthen up around that area, strengthen your body up a little bit more globally. And one of the things I always tell people, that it's a statistic I heard years ago, and it's kind of a sad statistic, but it's what really drives this point home, is our bodies are designed to be moving about 80+% of our waking day. So on average, you're talking about 10 to 12 hours of the waking day. When you're awake and up and about, you should be actively moving around. You should be standing, you should be walking, you should be lifting stuff up, moving around, and only sedentary or at rest for about 20%, which is about 3 to 4 hours of our waking day. Especially in America, but most westernized countries, but especially in America, we've completely reversed that. If you get 3 or 4 hours of activity in the day, good on you. That's not the norm. We just don't do as much as we used to. So that's why this has become such an important topic, and it becomes such a detrimental component to people's health. It's why encouraging people to stay active as much as they can is something we're doing on the daily basis. But again, beyond just getting active, it's working on specific things that are going to help strengthen your body. So once you're in motion, once you're moving, getting your body a little stronger to make it permanent is a huge, huge factor. Next, we're going to switch gears a little bit from trauma that causes these aches and pains to stress. This is one that not everyone realizes how much it can affect their body. And again, if you want to know the physiology or how that happens, go back to the Facebook post. But what absolutely hands down, stressful events in our lives can cause us to be in pain. It can cause us to have restrictions, and it can cause us to not be able to function the way that we should. There are 2 types of stress. The first one we're going to talk about is acute stress. This is a major stressful event that happened in a short period of time. I'm going to give you a few extreme examples, but it happens to everybody. A loved one getting very, very ill or even passing away. Losing a job, or losing a house. After the hurricane, I say losing a house, but I mean having a traumatic event around you. Like after the hurricane, we saw people who just their lives were semi-devastated by the circumstances around them. These type of stressful events, these acute stressors, cause your body physiologically to respond in crazy ways, and it will cause a lot of aches and pains. People feel lousy, they'll feel tired, they'll feel sick, and it does depress their immune system, and then they can actually catch a cold, so they can be sick in other ways. But how much stressful events affect you is surprising to some people. They don't realize it. They're like, oh, it's just stress, I don't deal with stress, right? Well, no, everybody actually does. So when you're responding to a stressful event, it's recognizing what the parameters of that stressful event are. For example, let's say you lose a pet or a loved one gets sick but then is recovering. Usually it takes about a month or 2 to kind of process that grief or process that incident. But if it's a bigger thing like losing your house or having a loved one pass away, not a lot of people realize you're talking about 6 to 8 months. It takes your body physiologically 6 to 8 months to truly and properly grieve that process and your body to respond and to get back to what we would say is adequate or normal physiological function or normal body function. Don't take that for granted. Don't try to rush that. Again, this is not one of those things that by rushing it or by speeding it up, you're making yourself healthier. In fact, usually the opposite is the case. If you try to just, I'll just get through it. I'll just push past it and I'm strong, whatever people tell themselves. They don't properly grieve those types of things, or don't properly process it, then your immune system now, or sorry, not your immune system, your nervous system now is kind of permanently depressed, and you will have bigger problems even further on down the line. And especially if another stressor comes, your body just will respond more poorly. So taking adequate time to process through that is important. But even beyond that, a lot of people are too strong, and I'll say guys are way worse in this than women are, but we're too strong to deal with stress typically. So we won't ask for any help. We'll just kind of go. We may tell a buddy, we may tell our spouse or a loved one, but we won't really deal with it properly. And so finding support for that is super duper important. So if you are in a stressful event, it is actually an incredibly important thing to find a confidant, to find somebody. Usually these can be spouses. This is pretty easy if you're married, or a sibling or a close friend. But in all reality, making sure you have a support group around you is incredibly important. Now, let's say you don't have a sibling who lives here or a spouse who lives here. This is where counseling can actually come into play. Some people are too important or too big to seek out professional help. It is important, if you don't already have that intrinsically in your life, to make sure that you're getting the proper support. Because if you don't, it'll affect you in the long run. Beyond that, giving the appropriate time and having that appropriate support, it's once you get to a place that your body is responding and you are starting to heal, then you're really dealing with more of the physical stuff that's come up, because you're usually going to be moving a lot less in these, as a result of these events, and you're usually going to be, sore because you're fatigued after that. So getting back to getting more energy, making sure you're taking care of yourself on the physical side of like getting back to what you could do physically before, the motion, back to doing whatever recreational activities you did enjoy, starting back in those. And then chemically, like, again, people will usually stop eating after some of these events, and they don't realize how nourished they've become. Getting back to those components, your normal lifestyle, is a huge part of making sure that, okay, now my body can truly recover from that. Now, moving forward, the other component is chronic stress. And again, when we are having an acute stressful event, we usually know about it. We usually can tell you, okay, this was going on in my life. Knowing how to respond to that's important. Chronic stress is something that people don't always recognize or don't always appropriately engage with. These are things like having a tough job, a job that maybe you don't really love, but you're going to keep doing it because it's paying the bills for you. Or having an elderly parent who you're trying to take care of, and this is going to be for years potentially to come. Or having a kid who won't grow up. Everyone's got their own stressors that can be repetitive, that can take years to really manifest. Chronic stress is one of those things that you have to approach a little bit differently. It's not something that's going to go away in a few months, or it's something that goes away and then we just respond to the residual component of it. You have to learn how to deal with this on the daily. You have to learn how to deal with this and make sure it's not actually causing you to have bigger problems as time goes on. So when chronic stress is going on, it creates three things that I'm going to kind of address individually. It creates metabolic fatigue. You actually neurologically create patterns that when you even think of the situation or think of the person or think of whatever is the stressor, you feel it. It just drains you. You don't have it. To break that metabolic fatigue, doing physical activity is actually a big thing. I may sound like a broken record. I keep telling people to move. It is amazing how much a little motion can do for your body. People oftentimes underestimate this, but specifically when we're talking about stress or chronic fatigue, it's not just because you're physically moving your muscles. This is actually a neurological thing. When you go on a 20 to 30 minute walk, you will create more serotonin. You will actually create dopamine when you're doing an enjoyable physical activity. It can be biking or walking or swimming, something you get out when you're in the sunshine. Even going to the beach, not even physically moving a lot, but doing an enjoyable thing in the midst of that, you create biochemicals that break these mental patterns, that break these neurological patterns. And that's super important when it comes to chronic stress. Because if you don't break the pattern, you'll get locked into it, and then it kind of compounds and it'll keep adding up. But when you can get out and start doing an easy walk, or get out and do an enjoyable ride, or get out and garden and do something that you know you like, and you're creating the serotonin and dopamine, your body will break that pattern and you can get out of it easier. Let's say you're dealing with an elderly parent or something. You have to deal with them, you go do it, but then if you can go do something enjoyable afterwards, you don't get stuck in that pattern for the rest of the day, or that stressful environment for the rest of the day. The second is setting a time, productive time, and we sometimes call this respite time. So there's doing activity, and then there's setting a time for yourself to mentally kind of download or decompress. If you're dealing with a kid who's, you have to, they're just running into a hard time in life, and you're always the phone call away, you have to make sure you have time where you're not expecting that phone call. You have to make sure you're setting time aside for you where you can mentally not be worrying about that. Usually, when we always talk about this, if you're a spiritual person, prayer time is vital to this. A time where we do meditation, people who do yoga, and you have that time, and it can be incorporated with other things. But this is actually more of mental downtime, where you're not replaying or rehashing a bad situation or the potential of a future bad situation in your mind. The last one is make changes progressively. So let's say it's a stressful work environment, and it's not something that you're ideally going to be stuck with for the rest of your life. But if there are changes you can make there, little changes, you need to. If you can just rearrange your desk so it's not as bad. If it's an ailing parent, taking the time, trying to change those interactions when you have those conversations. If it's a kid who's calling you and their life's always falling apart, trying to, and in part you are trying to help them out as well in these situations when you're dealing with other people, but it's for your benefit too, to make sure that when you're in the midst of what the stressor is, if it's a chronic stressor, something that comes around again and again, that you can make subtle or small modifications that give the situation a better twist or give it a little bit more productive help, so it doesn't just drain you continuously and only make it worse, not only for you, but obviously for the other people involved with the situation. Well, chronic stress is one of those things that it doesn't happen, again, after a couple of weeks. It's not just one event. It takes a long time, and we oftentimes don't realize we've gotten there. We've gotten to this point where this situation is creating that. So recognizing it and starting to make those changes can be incredibly beneficial. Then third kind of category, so we've talked about some of the physical components, we've talked about some of the mental emotional components. The third kind of overarching category that we're going to talk about is chemical. And when we talk about chemical, there are two ways that this can cause some issues. There's toxicity, or too much of something that's not necessarily good, and deficiencies. We're going to touch on chemical toxicities. And I've kind of broken these down into three subcategories, if you will, and in part because of how you deal with it. We're going to talk about medications. Any and every time, if I haven't told you this, Dr. Lee probably has told you this, any and every time you put a synthetic chemical into your body has to process it out. It is not an option. Every medication that you put in your body has to deal with and to get rid of it because it can't absorb it. These are synthetic chemicals that your body can't deal with. They are usually designed to help with some other symptom, but if you keep loading your body with chemicals that it has to constantly process out and you kind of overwhelm it or put so much in, your body can't process it out at the same rate, it's going to cause you some problems. And so knowing that, you have to always be mindful of not just what you're on, but how much of how many things you're on. The average American is on 8 prescription medications nowadays. I'm on none. Somebody out there is on 16. So it's a lot that we're putting in our bodies. And if we don't realize that sometimes 2 medications can compound and cause other things, we have to be aware that these are possibilities. Now, it should be your pharmacist who talks to you about these things. That's what pharmacists are there for. But having intentional conversations with your general practitioner, with your pharmacist, whoever prescribes this, is important. Not only because if they ever change it, it can affect you differently. You think, well, I was already on this medication. All they did was up it by 20 milligrams. It can absolutely change how your body will respond to it. So making sure you're having those conversations whenever you're making changes, but also accumulation. I'll touch on one prescription specifically, and those are statin drugs. Statin drugs are for high cholesterol. The #1 side effect of statin drugs is musculoskeletal aches and pains. Why? It strips vital chemicals out of your body. So when we're dealing with prescription medications, you have to understand what's going on physiologically, and you don't have to get into the weeds. It's not like, oh, you need to you need to become a biochemist to know what's in it. Having the conversations with your chiropractor, having conversations, more importantly, with whoever's prescribing it, making sure that you're responding appropriately to it is part of that component. But knowing what is being taken out of your body as a result of these synthetic chemicals is important. I sometimes deal with a nutraceutical rep in town who has a list of, if you're on this medication, of taking these components out of your body. So replacing these replacing these components with supplements is super important, because otherwise it will cause some pain to come on. And so that's one thing that we're always trying to guide you guys in the right direction if that comes in, but knowing that it's not just that it can accumulate, it's what it takes out and what you could be replacing it with. Because sometimes you can't necessarily go off of medication. I mean, sometimes you can get to a stable place and get off it, sometimes you can't. So making sure that if you can't get off something, or you're going to be on something for a prolonged period of time, it's not stealing other vital components or vital chemicals or cofactors out of your body. And so replacing those becomes important. The next is processed foods. Who loves to shop the perimeter of the grocery store where all the real food is? This is always what we're describing, but the reality is nowadays there are so many things to choose from, and there's so much garbage out there, to be honest with you. There's plenty of good stuff out there, but there's so much garbage out there, and realizing that when we're not eating real food, again, our bodies have to process out the stuff that's added in. The one thing I'll use as an example here are things that give food shelf stability. Things that give food the ability to sit on a shelf for weeks, if not months, are not good for you. They're basically slowly embalming you. They're designed to not let the food spoil, but that doesn't mean it's nutritious to you. In fact, your body again now has to process that out. So when we're shopping, when we're when we're talking about processed foods, it's trying to minimize it. It's trying to find things that are maybe alternative that are still easy to grab, easy to utilize, but don't have that same level of added chemicals to them. Again, not for your health, but for the stability of the food in a lot of senses. The more natural we can make our food, the more whole we can make our food, obviously, the better it is for you. So just minimizing, that's typically the #1 thing you can do with those types of things, is minimize that processed food. Because if you do get enough of it, you will become pro-inflamed. That inflammation will result in you not feeling good on a variety of different levels. And the last thing I'm going to talk about, speaking of pro-inflammation, is good old sugar. Is sugar a processed food? No, it's not. Is sugar bad for you? No, it's not. Sugar is one of those things that's pure glucose. It's pure energy for your body. Here's the thing about sugar. We don't need as much as we get. Everybody thinks however much sugar is in this thing is really not that much. And most people also think, oh, if I do 5 minutes of activity, I probably burnt off, the muffin I just ate. No, it usually takes about an hour or two of activity to burn off the slice of cake or the muffin that you just ate. The problem with sugar is we become quite literally toxic in it. We just have so much of it, it becomes a level of inflammation in our body. When you have too much sugar, your body starts to metabolically shift to storing it, and thus creates inflammatory responses. So reducing added sugar is the key word there, the buzzword there. Reducing that added sugar is such an important thing. Honestly, you can, and some of the most popular or famous diets right now are these ketogenic diets, meaning they're using ketones, not glucose, for energy, or your paleo diets, stuff that's only like mostly meat, where you're getting protein, high protein, low carb or low sugar intake. I'm not saying right or wrong, separate conversation or whether these are good or bad types of diets. It depends on you, it depends on what your personal goals are. But one of the reasons these have become so popular is because they are reducing that increased sugar level. We've got to be careful of what we're putting in our bodies, whether it's synthetic components, whether it's just processed things, or whether it's something that our body can or will use for productive means, but in high quantities, they will become issues. So mostly with food, it's reduction when we're talking about how do you help yourself. But if it is processed components, we can be talking about how much it takes out of your body. And that actually kind of goes into the next thing, which are deficiencies. So the first one I mentioned on the toxicities were prescription medications, and one of the things that they do and how they cause pain and problems for our bodies is that they steal out or they strip out cofactors. Well, that creates a deficiency. But when we're talking about deficiencies in general, and you don't have to be on a prescription medication to have deficiencies in your body, we're not usually talking about macronutrients, which are your carbs, your proteins, your fats. We're typically talking about micronutrients, which are cofactors, they're vitamins, they're minerals, they're things that your body needs, not in large quantities, but if it doesn't have enough of them, they'll start to cause issues for your body and how it will respond. The two main issues they'll cause are physiological and neurological. What do I mean by physiological responses? For example, if you are really energy deficient, if you're not eating the right things, you've become actually deficient in things like magnesium and calcium, or if for a lot of women who have osteopenia or osteoporosis, where the calcium is actually getting kind of stolen out of the bones and it becomes systemic, but it's not in the right place in your body, then what can happen is those deficiencies can lead to the muscles not being able to respond well. That fatigue can lead to the discomfort. Again, you want a full detail on how that works, go to the Facebook post. But when you steal those out, it has to be replaced. If you don't have the magnesium or the calcium, your body can't respond, especially then, like I've been saying, I'm trying to get you to walk more, I'm trying to get you to exercise more. You don't have that stuff in you, you go try to do those things, you're not going to be in a good place. You're going to start causing more issues when you're trying to do other good things. Now, on the neurological side, we're usually talking about things like potassium and sodium. These are things that your nervous system uses to send signals and to make sure your body is functioning well. This is usually a dehydration thing. So, welcome to Florida. We're in Florida summer now, and it is hot, and you will sweat. And if you're doing 5 minutes of activity, you sweat it as much as an hour and 5 minutes, in the winter time, or if you're from up north. So making sure that if you're getting depleted in these types of micronutrients, again, usually sweat's one that will steal those the potassium, the sodium, the electrolytes more than any, that you have to replace those. If you don't, it can lead to some metabolic fatigues. It can actually cause your body to not be able to respond right. Again, heat fatigue, heat stroke, these are real things, but that's what is the precursor to those. Being diminished of these is what starts to cause those types of responses. So the last one I'm going to touch on, and this one here is not something I'm going to spend very much time on at all, but it does cause musculoskeletal aches or pains. It causes people to not be feeling good. So I don't want to just skip over it or not address it. It's visceral referred pain. Visceral referred pain means something like your heart, your stomach, your liver, your kidneys is in a bad place. None of your internal organs have any nerve sensors in them. They do not say, ow. What they do is when they can't function right anymore, they start yelling at your nervous system. They're sending as much signals as you can. And sometimes those signals can swap over and affect pain receptors in your spine or where they're relaying to the rest of your nervous system. And it turns out that that causes visceral referred pain. Who's ever heard of someone who's about to, or is having a heart attack? They have shoulder pain, they have jaw pain, right? Well, your heart's over here. It's not on your shoulder, it's not up in your head. The reason you get pain in those areas is because the nerves that go to those two areas of your body are really close to the nerves where your heart relays to your nervous system. So visceral referred pain is one of those things that absolutely can cause pain, but here's my one caveat about that. This is your body's last-ditch effort. Your body only gives you visceral referred pain when you are in a bad place. Don't ignore it. If you've gone and gotten checked out and it's not something from a physical issue, it's not something from being stressed out, make sure that it's not something going on with your viscera, with some of your internal organs. They're also very commonly, they come in what's called concurrent conditions, meaning if your body's at a point where some of your organs are really struggling to operate well, you probably have other issues going on as well. So just being mindful of the fact that if you have some muscular aches or pains and you're dealing with one or multiple of those issues and there's still some stuff going on, it could be another thing going on with some organs. So make sure you're getting that checked out or talking with your doctors about it. Like I said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one because this is a last-ditch effort of your body. Your body doesn't normally give you pain from your heart, your liver, your lungs, your spleen, any of that stuff, but if it is coming, don't ignore it, is the bottom line there. And getting those things checked out is incredibly important. So the main three takeaways that I want to touch on, and that kind of goes with those components of your physical components that are causing pain, your mental emotional components that are causing you pain, and the chemical components that will cause pain, is how to respond to our body. A lot of these things come in pairs. You could be stressed and you could have had an accident. You know, you could be taking a medication and have some chemical toxicity, and you could, you know, have had a repetitive injury that's been going on for years. You can have multiple things. So taking stock in like what's going on with you and focusing on one of these areas that seems to be the biggest, or if you need to start doing addressing a couple, that's important too. Getting your body in motion and keeping it in motion is like, it sounds so silly, so simple, but most of us don't move enough. If you are a person, you just know you're more sedentary, or you have activities just only repetitive, you do the same thing. Getting in motion is super important, so making sure you're moving well. Taking health perspective, you know, seeing what's going on, making sure that you're giving yourself what we call respite time. That breakaway time is so important. If you're too busy to take time for yourself, you're gonna pay for it. So don't be too busy to take time for yourself. Make sure you're doing some self-care. And I know guys are typically worse with this, but all my moms and the women, you're maternal. You're gonna worry about everyone else first. Guys will just ignore it. You just put yourself last, and that's how it works so often. So make sure that you're taking appropriate time for yourself. Take stock. If it's a stressful environment or stressful situation, make sure you set that time aside to do things. That goes to that thinking well. And the last is don't get overwhelmed or stuck in the weeds when it comes to chemical stuff. I know this is the component that people are most like, oh my gosh, it's too much information, there's too many things out there. Keep it simple. If you don't eat enough good stuff, you know who you are. You're a microwave dinner type of person. Start getting better quality food. Walk the edge of the grocery store as you're buying. Go to things that you can get resources. If you feel like you just can't shop, although there's a bunch of not good stuff out there, there are plenty of really good products out there now that are mail order. They will send you a meal that all you have to do is prep, and now they'll send you the meals already prepped that are organic, good qualities. You can take advantage of these if you don't feel like you can figure it out at the store yourself. But shopping the perimeter of the store is one of the easiest things. The other component is, if you know that you can't do that, you're not going to buy one of these meals. You go to the store, you get the same thing over and over again, and you know you don't get enough of the good nutrients. The 8 to 12 fruits and vegetables a day. Those baseline nutrient levels that we need. Taking supplementation is not a bad thing. Taking supplementation can absolutely help you with that. Is it a necessity? No, not always. I mean, there are some people who argue our food is less nutrient dense or nutrient rich now than it ever has been. And that is a very valid argument. And if that is the case, you can do what's called cycling. So you may not be a daily supplementer. You may not need to take, your greens and your vitamins on the regular every single day. But if you think that what you are getting, even if you are shopping, the better parts of the store, but it may not be the best quality, you can't afford all organic everything, then taking supplements on a quarterly basis, where like you get a thing of vitamins, a thing of dense greens, and you go through it. Usually they come in about month supplies. You go through that and you've taken it for a month, you don't have to necessarily refill it right away, because you're still trying to eat as well as you can, but you want to make sure you are getting sufficient nutrients back in your diet, sufficient supplements into your diet. So if you feel like you're shopping well enough, great, but that's another alternative, and that's kind of the eat well. Move well, think well, eat well are 3 pillars that we stand on. You will hear us talk about it here all the time. If you're dealing with one of these things, we always will try and find the component that is going to give you the biggest kind of bang for your buck, or the thing that we think is going to give you the biggest change in a short period of time. But this is a simple way to kind of break it down. And obviously, always know that you can ask us. We are here for you to answer any questions that you have. So thank you for your time, and I hope you guys have a great day and you've learned something that will help you out.
Yeah, thank you.